All right. I figured I'd do a quick live this morning just to talk about some of the energies that's going on right now. Uh, we have tomorrow Mars about to ingress into the sign of Leo, and that is in the Sidereal zodiac. So if anybody's looking at their tropical systems, they won't see that. But this is a little bit of a concern because we've got a lot of retaliation stuff that might be happening with Russia and Ukraine after that attack that was just done. And we might just see things increase a little bit. If anybody caught my live last Sunday, it was really brief, but it was basically with Chris Bledsoe. He kind of said the same thing that I'm getting, and that is that, we're going to see a little bit of an increased intensity right now. And I think it's going to back off as we start getting into the fall. A lot of people are really nervous right now with finances, so on and so forth. I have to tell you, if you have access and you look at what does this mean to us all individually? Well, when Mars ingresses from a water sign, which is Cancer, into Leo, it's often pretty intense. It has a big jolt of energy. And I've noticed I can feel it myself. I can actually feel it starting to happen a little bit here. And depending on where it is, what house it's in your chart, and also what aspects it makes to your birth chart, you can really feel the stuff. So again, this is, something that's, got to be looked at with an astrology program, but pretty powerful. And again, in the mundane sense, or you could say in the worldly sense, what's it going to mean? Well, I personally think we're going to see a little bit of increased retaliation and violence here. My take is, if I'm reading the astrology right here, we're going to see Russia really make a push, and then they'll draw a line in the sand, and then this will probably settle. And I hope I'm right about this. I don't see World War III coming. A lot of people are really worried about it. Of course, Russia's actually used those words. They said, well, World War III, right? I don't think it's going to go there. Let's hope it doesn't, even if it gets a little dicey for a while, because the other symbolism isn't there. It's not there to have World War III break out. And even if it increases a little bit, I think it's going to back off eventually. Nobody wants to blow themselves up, and nobody would win a nuclear war at all. So I think, and again, that's what the astrology supports. So here, I'm going to turn on some of the comments. I can't stay too long this morning. We'll see, how I can only stay to about 9:30. I've got appointments here, but I'm going to start making a commitment to maybe doing a midweek update on Wednesdays, because I've been kind of busy and backed off on some of the lives only because it's been so busy for me. My schedule has been really busy with readings, and I also have a lot of retainer clients. I do a lot of contract signing. I do a lot of interrogation questions, and also been very busy with gems. So it's been a lot. So, it'll be fun. We'll start doing these midweek updates on Wednesday morning. So now everybody's finally coming back on here. I see the stream going. And so the other thing I want to talk about, we do have a full moon coming up on, of course, June 11th. Which, we get that every month. We're going to get a full moon. But I think the big one right now is this Mars moving into the sidereal sign of Leo. It's going to intensify. And remember, it's going to go to this conjunction in July of Ketu, which is the moon's south node eclipse points. And those are intense. And, we're also having the eclipse points move too. They just moved. So that's very, very powerful when all this stuff happens. But the good news is I don't see World War III. A lot of people have also been talking about crypto and finances, and, like which way to go. I think the finances are ultimately going to end up turning around. I know a lot of people out there, Jamie Dimon, so on and so forth, has been talking about this huge crash economically. I'm not seeing that by the astrology at this point. And I hope I'm right on that. I do think it's going to be a roller coaster ride, but I think things are going to start to turn around and shift as we start to get into fall. I see the next big astrological thing is coming up in 2028. That's more where I'm seeing some trouble here. So a lot of people are jumping on here, and somebody said, "Can you talk about having an exalted Jupiter in your birth chart with Jupiter in exaltation in Cancer in a few days?" Yeah. Well, this person is looking at a tropical zodiac, so that's pretty cool. Um, See, now this is what we get into is if you look at what we call quote unquote Vedic astrology versus tropical astrology, you're going to find there's about a 24-degree difference. And I don't think I've ever seen more dissension in astrology than I have like with a herd of cats or something, in terms of disagreement. Some people are hardcore tropical traditional astrologers and other people are hardcore siderealists. And I was just crazy enough to be both because that's actually a great question. And by the way, to her question, I'll answer that in a second. But if everyone notices, and this is to the credit of the tropical zodiac right now, Saturn had just ingressed in the tropical zodiac into debilitated Aries, and I can feel it. So this is why I've always been into both camps. I've always liked both tropical and the sidereal because they both matter. You just have to analyze them with their own techniques. But to answer her question, Jupiter in exaltation, if you have that in your birth chart, whether it's in tropical or sidereal, it's really a good thing. And Jupiter represents the life force. They call it Jiva of the soul. And Jupiter, if you look at its glyph, it's the crescent of the moon over the cross. And it's a really, not only is it the largest planet in the solar system, but it's also really an uplifting, buoyant, and excellent energy for people to be able to expand. The thing I would say about Jupiter in exaltation is it always brings divinity. It always brings growth, life, and creation. And I always say when I'm looking at a birth chart, if I see Jupiter in exaltation or in Cancer, I go right off the bat. The angels don't give that one out easy. And, this gets into the whole topic of what is astrology, right? Are we our astrology or is the astrology us? I think the latter. And anytime I see a birth chart with an exalted Jupiter, I know that that soul had probably done a lot of really good things in order to earn that. I disagree with a lot of astrologers. They all run around and tell everybody, you're your sun sign or you are your astrology. Or we're even calling ourselves Scorpios and, whatever else, Aries or whatever your sun sign is. I think nothing could be further from the truth. So if you have an exalted Jupiter, that is a very divine thing. And I always find people who have exalted Jupiters and well-placed Venuses, they're just really kind people. They're good people in the soul. And I've also noticed sometimes debilitated Saturn in a birth chart. That person either has some very challenging karma that they've created for themselves, or there's some elements in the soul that needs to be cleansed out, if you will. So interesting stuff. So that's a good question. I like that. And I always like it when Jupiter ingresses into Cancer. And again, I feel the tropical zodiac too. A lot of people say, well, how can that be? Well, they're layers. I really have to say the sidereal is more the higher forces, and the tropical is more the dense force that's playing out on the physical plane. And when you think about tropical astrology, it's really accurate because, you got the spring equinox, the summer solstice, the fall equinox, and the winter solstice. And nobody can deny those seasons. Even if you live in the Amazon jungle, you're going to feel a little shift there. So it's pretty powerful stuff. So good luck to you with the exalted Jupiter. That was a good question. I like it. So also somebody saying here, people are also turning against Trump. What is she saying? The Napolitano, yeah, Ritter, McGregor, all these people. Yeah, it's interesting what's happening in the politics right now. I mean, one of the things for sure is there was something really dicey going on with that attack in Russia that Ukraine made. And I don't think Trump was fully apprised of that, Trump seems to be a guy who wants to run the United States as a president, as a president should. But when you really look at the web of control that's fanned out and all the black ops stuff and secret stuff that goes on in this country, and the bankers at the top, backdoor funding everything. This is why it's going on. And I really have to say, we saw that. We've seen this with COVID. We've seen this with all the wars, 9/11, on, and you keep going back. There's clearly forces that are funding this stuff through the back door. And I think it was JFK said, he says, apparently the office of the presidency is being used for something it wasn't intended for. They really want Biden's. They want somebody who does nothing, comes out, looks presidential, stands there and says a few words and makes everybody feel like they got a president while everybody else is running everything. And I think Trump is getting resistance a lot because he's trying to run things like a president. And this is going to be very interesting. I still say Trump's inauguration chart was by far the most transformational I've ever seen in any U.S. president's inauguration, which was huge, really, really huge. So a lot of stuff coming in here. I'm trying to keep up with all these comments here. Somebody's mentioning here about Rahu. Rahu and Ketu are the moon's north and south nodes. And definitely, we're seeing Mars, and that's why I jumped on today, is just to talk about tomorrow. In fact, everybody can check this out, see if you feel anything. But tomorrow at 1:43 p.m., and that's Pacific Daylight Time. So if you're on the East Coast, you just add 3 hours. If you're in the Midwest, add 2. If you're on the other side of the world, calculate accordingly. But at about 1:43 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, Mars clocks into Sidereal, Leo. And that's jumping from a water trine, which is again Cancer, Scorpio, and of course Pisces, now into the fire trines, which is Leo, Sagittarius, and of course Aries. So what's powerful about that is anytime in the sidereal zodiac, a planet moves from the water trines into the fire, it's usually very volatile. It's an abrupt shift. In fact, they call it Gandanta. So that's very, very powerful. Somebody's also asking here, what about Jupiter in Aries with Saturn in Aries tropical? Well, I would say that, let me see if that's actually the case here. I always like to verify that stuff. I mean, right now, what we've got going on is in the tropical system. You've got, Jupiter will hit Cancer. I'm looking at my screen up above here. It will hit Cancer in the next day or two. I have to kind of do this on the computer to actually see when that happens. And let me just run forward. So it looks like it's going to be right on the 10th. June 10th is when tropical Jupiter will go into exaltation of Cancer. I think what this person might have meant is, what do I think of Saturn in Aries in tropical with Neptune? Because Jupiter is not in Aries. They said Jupiter, but anyhow, that's the other one that's coming up in July. This is why I think things are going to get a little crazy between now and this August. And the reason why, not only do we have Mars clocking towards a conjunction of Ketu, but you've got a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And you might say, well, what does that mean? Well, the reality dissolving, that's really confusing. In fact, I just had a client yesterday who's got a Saturn return going on. And anybody right now who has a hard aspect of Saturn is also going to be having hard aspects in their birth chart from Neptune. Why? Because Saturn and Neptune are together. So this is the thing, when you watch mundane astrology and how it affects your birth chart, it's huge, because usually the same aspects in the sky are going to be doing the same aspects to your birth chart. So this poor lady, she says, my God, she goes, I feel like I'm going to jump off a bridge. And I said, well, you've got Neptune conjuncting Saturn, as well as you're having a Saturn return. So in the world, to answer this person's question, Saturn and Neptune conjunctions is reality dissolving. It's also really structures dissolve as well. Neptune is a really weird planet. Not only in astronomy is it a total gas giant, but it tends to act that way. I always see hard aspects to Neptune in a birth chart. It's usually the twilight zone. And so expect some kind of weird stuff going on because Saturn's a planet of structure. And when it's conjuncting Neptune, it can be pretty dicey, pretty weird. So, but this never stops. Again, we are in a Kala Sarpa yoga, and you might say, "What the heck is that?" Well, that's where all the planets, the inner seven at least, are in between the moon's eclipse points. And that goes on until the 28th of July. So again, when you add all this up, you got Mars going to a conjunction of K2, you got the Saturn, Neptune conjunction. And here's the other thing I didn't mention. We've got Uranus sweeping over more of these fixed stars. I'm going to get into that more this weekend in a more detailed way. So anyways, yeah, a lot of questions here on Trump. I see a lot. Here's another person saying that, Trump has not even been president for 5 months and people are so impatient when he's been trying to make changes or turn the biggest government in history to betterment for the people. I'd have to say there is so many tentacles in the government. There's so much stuff going on. President Eisenhower had warned about this in the late 50s, coming into the 60s. He said, we are creating a monster behind the scenes of these unelected officials. And I think it goes even way farther back. I always talk about how Woodrow Wilson is the guy who signed this country over to the bankers. And I think it was one of our founding fathers, I can't remember if it's Jefferson or Washington, had said, if anyone ever gets to print our money, they're going to be more dangerous than any standing army. Well, that's exactly what happened in 1913 when Woodrow Wilson signed us over. And right on the heels of that, World War I dropped out. And it's interesting. I kind of look at Woodrow Wilson as the entrance of this banker control, and Biden may have been the outro of it. I've been mentioning for years this 2020 Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and also, more importantly, the Saturn-Jupiter mutation conjunction, which only happens about every 200-something odd years. And this is really, really powerful. And it happened on the winter solstice of 2020, right in between when Biden got inaugurated. And of course, everything started happening. And I have to say, excuse me, that the astrology mirrors to the T when these major changes in society happen. And I really believe these people at the top of the pyramid, I know they use astrology. I think it was J.P. Morgan said it best. He said, millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do. And today it might even be trillionaires. But clearly these people are very aware of the cycles because stuff happens right on the precise timing of this astrological stuff. Is absolutely amazing. So, again, you could have set your watch to when COVID really officially broke, even though a lot of people say, yeah, it started in the fall of, 2019. And then, of course, was already happening right at the end of 2019, beginning of 20. But the panic button, the all hands on deck panic button, put your mask on, right? Get your vaccination, all happened precisely when Saturn and Pluto in the tropical zodiac joined. I had a lot of arguments with astrologers. Oh, you got to look at the sidereal. The sidereal actually happened in the fall of 2019, but the tropical was more accurate. My camera will come right back on. It just times out. I'm on a DSLR. That's why. So it totally mirrored the tropical astrology. That's why I always argue with, I don't argue with anybody, but I always tell the siderealists, don't be so quick to dismiss the tropical zodiac either. That's why you really have to dovetail them together in their respective techniques. And I find there's a lot of accuracy to that. So that's, again, this whole thing with Trump, I say give it time. They would love to erase this guy. They were marching, and when I say they, I'm probably talking about the bankers and the New One World Orders at the top, and they have not gone away. It's really interesting to see how now all these journalists, including Jean-Claude, or whatever her name is, John Pierre, they're all coming out with books and backpedaling and saying, oh, geez, mea culpa, we were wrong. And, it's a very interesting reversal right now, how they're dusting their tracks on everything that they did covering up Biden. And of course, that's all over the news right now. But my focus is more into what's happening with the world, because a lot of people are really concerned about AI. I keep hearing about it. I was on the phone with a guy in Europe yesterday. He was very knowledgeable, a really smart financial guy. And he was telling me he was in Switzerland or someplace with some bankers. And he was showing me on how AI can literally just pop up your entire life history. They can find out everything about you in the click of a button on a computer. So all this databasing that's been typed in here for the last 30, 40 years is now really being accessible by government agencies and banking and financial institutions. So they know everything about you. They know, if you had a paper route when you were a kid. I did actually. But anyways, really interesting because AI, we've seen all the Terminator movies, the Blade Runners, the iRobots and all the other movies. And I got to tell you, there's no question AI, I think, is going to rapidly ramp up. I don't think it's there yet, but it's getting there close. And I cannot imagine what the governments have, especially when you have the kind of funding that they have. It's kind of eerie. It's just like Terminator. And let's hope that we're smart enough to keep that demon in the bottle. And it's literally Pandora's box. And if that box opens, where it gets control of our military systems and even just the energy systems of society, the electrical grid, all that stuff, and decides humans are not smart enough, we could have a real problem. So we got to have that kill button there somewhere to stop everything. So, but I kind of say, hey, divinity always brings into creation safeguards, even though stuff gets crazy. It always tends to be, short-circuited. So yeah, somebody said here Eisenhower was a god. Yeah, Eisenhower is an interesting guy. I mean, he and MacArthur as well. I always show that picture of my grandfather. He was it's a really cool picture. He was guiding Eisenhower. That was back in, I think that was 1946. Eisenhower had just and MacArthur, the world had just the whole war had completed, and I'm trying to find that picture. I don't think I have it here. Yeah, here it is. Actually, that was a cool picture. And that was my grandfather there. I'm circling there, and that you can see all the old cars. That was General MacArthur behind the flag right there. So really a cool picture, and I always enjoyed that. So he was the guy who brought me my first motorcycle in 1967. That'll give you an idea how many times I've wiped out on a motorcycle, right? But a lot of fun. I really enjoyed having him. He was a character. He was a lot of fun. Anyway, somebody's adding another post here that they're saying, they're saying Trump tapped someone here to gather Americans' data, and that org has done some really bad things. Yeah, you bet. Government, no matter who's running this place, and again, I'm not here to defend anybody politically or not, Trump or whatever, but yeah, the system of government is so massive and so powerful, and it's going to get a lot more powerful with all this AI coming in. And, all the futuristic movies always had this bleak outlook of, control and dumbing us down. And I think that's, something that's been kind of a theme even all the way back to the monarchies. Look at how the king dominated all the poor farmers and the people of the towns, if he was despotic. So it's really important to keep this country's Constitution and Bill of Rights in play. And even that can be bent all over the place. And we've certainly seen that, haven't we? So anyway, someone says, correction, Jupiter in Aries, sidereal natal with Saturn in Aries now. I don't understand that, but Jupiter is actually leaving tropical Gemini and going into tropical Cancer. But if you're a siderealist, the Jupiter is in Gemini right now. So there's about a 24-degree difference, just so people know. And again, that's very confusing if you're not familiar with astrology. But again, I think the simple way I can kind of arrive at that for me is I find the tropicals a more dense layer of the physical time-space continuum world, if you will. And the sidereal is more the forces behind the scenes. So they both really do work. I'm always blown away with the cycles that I see in the birth chart between the doshas and the Kala Chakra dosha and the transits. Absolutely amazing how accurate it is. And the tropical too. See, one of the things I think a lot of Vedic astrologers miss that the tropical traditional astrologers had, and that is what we call the terrestrial house-based systems. And what that means in plain English is depending on where you're born on the earth, longitude and latitude also really affects that, is the house divisions. See, Vedic astrology just kind of whole signs everything, which I find is very accurate. But the terrestrial divisions of where you were born on the earth has to do with the angularity that the earth is at. And even if you're a flat earther, it's still, that angle is still there in the trajectory of the zodiac belt. It's actually at an angle of about 23 degrees. It's just short of 24 degrees. So pretty wild stuff. And again, I find it very, very accurate. Yeah, somebody's mentioning here, Patton wanted to take on the Soviets and MacArthur wanted to go into China. They were both right. Yeah, they might have been. I mean, that's, clearly the bankers love opposing forces because then they can fund them. I just watched a clip yesterday about how the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers found it was much more profitable to loan money to countries than it was to people. And that's, of course, now why they're at the top of the pyramid doing this. So, yeah, it's powerful, powerful stuff. Anyways, I have to sign off here because I have another client. But like I said, I'm going to start to do what we call a midweek update on Wednesdays. And I'll probably do it at about this time, between 9 and 9:30. And I really appreciate everybody coming on and spending some time with me here. And there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. There always is. And I'll guess I'll sign off now. And I'll see you next week, Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock Pacific time. And until then, have a good week. And again, just keep the rubber side down, so they say. All right, have a great week.